So we've seen in previous videos how we can develop an automated trading strategy around signals that are being sent from TradingView to TradersPost and then being executed at our broker. We've even taken code from a few other indicators, put them together in order to generate a signal. But what if we don't want to do that? What if we want to still use the indicators that we have in our chart, but just tie them together somehow so that a trade only gets executed when multiple different conditions are true? That's what we'll do today. We'll create a different type of an alert script that can grab information from multiple different indicators and then execute a trade accordingly. So we have our chart. Let's go ahead like normal and create an indicator. We'll call this Confluence Alerts. We'll make this overlay true so that we can add a few things to the chart to make sure everything is working the way it's supposed to. Now we're going to use the existing alerts panel in TradingView as a reference for the sort of things that we're looking for. So here we can see that when we're creating a normal alert, we're going to give it a condition. We're going to let us know what kind of event is happening. And then we want the value to cross some sort of price or some sort of level in order to execute the true condition. So we're going to start off with an initial source, right? The source is the value that we're going to be considering. And we're going to want, let's say, for example, when one value crosses another value. So let's start off with this. Since we're using source and we have to pass it a default value, we'll always use close. Then we need to track the event. Since we can have multiple different events, just like we have in the Create Alerts panel in TradingView, let's create a few of them here now. And here we need our final source. But remember, we can either be crossing an existing source, such as an EMA, or it might be a specific value that is appearing on the chart. And we want the opportunity to choose one or the other. So let's create a selection field. We'll default to value. So here we have a field that says value or source. That'll show up as a drop-down in the script settings. And now we actually have to collect that data for both the value and source. Value will be a float, and source will be a source. Right now, we're just going to leave plot close here. Otherwise, we'll get an error message that says that the indicator needs to have something outputted to the chart. We'll add that. And we take a look at the settings. We can see all the settings we created here. That when this value is crossing either value or source, then the condition will be true. We haven't set up all the logic for it, but here you can see this is where we'd be gathering the information. So now we could start setting up our logic. Now let's say we only had the crossing event to deal with. Well, we would do something like this. That the condition would be true if condition when was crossing, let's say, the value. But since here we don't know if it'll be the value or the source, we need a different variable that'll take that into consideration. So we'll create a new variable over here. We'll call it vSource. And we'll say that depending on the value of the condition type, if this is equal to value, go ahead and use value, and otherwise use source. And this is what we can use for the crossing. But now this is only taken into consideration the cross event. And we have 4 events that we have to take into consideration. Oh, I can see here I forgot one. So we have 5 events we have to take into consideration. So we'll set up variables for each one. Here we have cross, cross over, cross under. We need one for greater. And our condition will depend on what the type is. So we'll use a switch case, which allows us to check one variable for different types of values. And these have to match exactly the text that shows up as our options for condition event. So here we need to pass each one of these variables because that's what needs to be considered for that condition. So if it's crossing, it'll be cross, cross up, cross over, and so on. So now our variable cond will return true depending on what type we choose and if that condition is true. And if it is, we want something to show up on the chart. Let's go ahead and just add some sort of marker. I can go ahead and command click on the function name to let me know what the parameters are for this function. Save that. Script updates. So let's go ahead and add a few indicators to the chart. We'll use an EMA, we'll use an RSI. Perfect. Now we can test our Confluence Alerts indicator. We'll go ahead and check it out. We'll say that when the price, let's say, is greater than our EMA, so we'll switch that to source and use the EMA that shows up in the dropdown. It's not working here because I have a typo. This needs to be condition event. So here we see that the markers show up whenever the price is above the EMA. So now we want to set this up so that we can have a second condition that has to deal with, let's say, the RSI. I'm going to make a couple of modifications to our existing settings just to make our life a little bit easier. First, I don't want them all to be on separate lines. Let's condense the space a little bit. I'm also going to want them grouped so that I can see one condition is separate from the other. So I'll use the inline parameter. And I'll want the when, event, and type to be grouped, and then value and source, we'll make that separate. So essentially here, as long as the inline is the same word, those fields will be together. And if they're part of the same group, they'll be together in that group. So let's save that, take a look. So now the ones that have inline condition are all on the same line. And the one for inline type is also on the same line, but they're all within this new group called condition 1. If there were too many fields here, they would just wrap to the next line. So you don't want too many things in the same line. And then also on mobile device, it could look a little bit weird. I don't think we need the words event or type over here. So let's get rid of those. Perfect. That's a little bit cleaner. That's what I would want. Let's go ahead and copy this. Yes, this is only for condition 1. So let's name this differently. These variables differently. We'll add a 1. Now we can copy the rest, the other 3. All right, so we have 3 conditions here. And we're seeing here that we don't want to have to repeat the same sort of checking that we're doing for these conditions. But here we can see that we're going to need a vSource and different types of checks for the conditions repeated for each one of these conditions. And when you're programming and you're seeing that you're doing something again and again and again, you write a function for it. So we'll create a function called check. And this function will take these parameters. So let's say it'll take when, event, type. The word type is already reserved within PineScript. And even though I think you can use it here, I don't like doing that. So I'll just remove the value source. And we'll return the condition value. We don't have to do that, but it's cleaner looking. So now here for our plot, we can just do check and pass the values that we collected in the settings. Let's change the way these look a little bit, just so we can see something on the chart. We save that and take a look. We have 3 conditions that show up here. Let's test the first one. If the close is greater than the source, which we'll say is the EMA, are we getting the markers? Yes, we are. Now let's say if the RSI is, let's call it crossing above the 70 line. So if the RSI is crossing up over value 70, I want to see these orange triangles. There we see them. And let's say for the third one, we'll use volume. And we'll say if the volume is greater than, let's say, the moving average for that volume. And we're seeing the fuchsia circle show up. So they're working. Now, the last thing we need to do here for this section is to create a condition when all of them are true. So that's simple enough. Down here, we want a condition if they're all true. Condition 1 and condition 2 and condition 3. So let's create those variables. And let's display a marker when they're all true. Every time we save a script in PineScript that we've edited, chances are the settings will be reset. So we have to do this every single time. We set up all three. So not all check. And we're seeing a purple square whenever it's pretty large. We're seeing a purple square show up when all three of those conditions are true. So here we have the blue triangle in the background, the fuchsia circle, the orange triangle, and then it's showing up as true. So if we wanted to, we can use this. We can create an alert, choose our indicator, Confluence Alerts, and say that when condition all is true, go ahead, and that value would be 1. When it's greater than 0, because 0 is false in programming, 1 is true. So if it's greater than 0, this would be true, and we could fire that alert if we wanted to. But in the next section, what we'll do is just beef up the script a little bit more to give us more functions and features that we might need. So one of the first things we're going to do here is that I don't like the way that this looks, where I'm passing these variables each and every time. If I want to add a new condition, it might be a little bit more tedious than I want it to be. So I'm going to do something here where I'm going to use a user-defined type, a UDT type of variable. I'll call it condition. And now I'm going to add something called a Boolean here for use, because I might want these conditions to be optional, right? Inside my settings, when I take a look at the script, what if I only want 2 of these conditions to be true? I would need to add a setting that allows me to toggle between those. Go ahead, and we'll call that use. All sources have a value of float that they return. And I'm just adding here the different settings that will be used. So here, I'll just have variable. So I'm going to initialize this condition 1 to be able to take the variable condition, which is a UDT, a variable I've defined specifically for the script. Then underneath for the rest of them, I'm using the dot notation in order to access the parameter. And I have to use colon equals because this value already exists and I'm updating it. Let me add the use. And I'm going to want to do that for all 3. So what's the benefit of doing that? Well, instead of having to pass all these parameters to this function, I could just pass that one variable. And I could tell my function that that variable is what they should expect. So the type is condition. Now within this variable, I need to be able to, since I'm passing a UDT called condition, these are all part of that. These variables need to be updated accordingly. I like here to name my variables with a specific format in order to make my life easier so it doesn't conflict with any other variables within the script or in any other script that I might tie to this later on. And then I'll do some final modification to this check function by turning it into a method since I'm using a defined object. And here this allows me to do this. No real difference here, but if down the line I wanted to add additional parameters to this function, this would make my life a little bit easier. So it should work exactly the same as we had it before. Let's just do a quick check. Oh, forgot to change these groups. I don't really like the space that shows up after the check here. So let me just move when up. Great. Condition 1, 2, and 3. We could just do a quick check to make sure it's working. Excellent. Now we actually have to use this option. We have to check to see if it's been activated. So we'll do that here. So after we've checked to see if it's crossed or greater than or what have you, we'll add an additional check. So we only want this to return true if the condition is use is on and this is true. Or if the condition is not on, we also want it to return true. Why? Because when we check it later on over here, for condition 1, 2, and 3, if condition 1, let's say, was deactivated, we don't want it being false to stop the all condition from firing. So here, if let's say condition 1 was off, this would be true. And then if condition 2 and 3 are true, then condition all is true and the alert will fire. Okay. Speaking of the alert, we want to go ahead and add, if the condition is true, we want to go ahead and add an alert. Now we don't have to do this. We can always do that inside of the create alert dialog, but it's nice to have this option directly in the indicator in case we want to have multiple of the indicators on the chart running at the same time. We can have it, the messages already pre-built and set up the way that we want it to. So here we need to add a message field. So let's go ahead and add a message field. I'll call this Confluence Alert. We want that to be in a group, its own group. And then this message, we can pass it to the alert. There's a frequency variable you might want. Let's go ahead and set frequency. I will give an option to the user to do that. Because in the create alert dialog, there's a frequency here, once per bar close, once per minute. Since there's a frequency setting here, it allows us to have frequency all, once per bar, or bar close. So let's give that option to the user. We'll default it to once per bar. We'll call it trigger like it does in TradingView. Then we can set up that frequency variable. Let's do it here. If it's once per bar, and we'll default that to once per bar. Frequency is used there. Perfect. Now let's clean this up. Let's add some comments so we can find our way again in the future if we need to. Now it might get a little bit messy on the chart, seeing all those conditions show up all the time. So let's go ahead and make that a little bit cleaner. Let's give the user an option to display those markers or not. And to show the Confluence marker. Here it is an attribute we can use called display. And if this guy is true, we'll use a ternary operator to say display all, and otherwise display none. We'll do the same one here. All right, let's see how that works. So if close is greater than the EMA, we'll see that on the chart. Perfect. We can toggle that on and off with this setting. Now let's say we had one Confluence. Let's do RSI is crossing up over 70. That shows up as an orange marker. And if we disable the condition 3, we should get the condition 3 is always true, and we should get the purple square. We could hide the markers. We could hide the main ones. And there we go. I see here our message field is a small field. Let's change that to a text area. Now it's a bigger field. And this would what would be passed to the alert when we create the alert for the script. We can see Confluence Alerts. And this is what would fire any alert function call. Maybe we might not want that. Maybe we want to have the field. So let's go ahead and if condition is all is true, we want also an alert condition. We'll do one for each one. Condition 1. Now when we create the alert, we'll also have condition 1, 2, and 3 here. All right, is there anything else we might want to do? Let's see here. Well, if we have more than one of these added to the chart, let's say we added a second one. When we go ahead and create the alert, we're not necessarily going to know which one of these we want to be using. So let's give this a name field. We'll put that in settings. It won't do anything within the script, but we'll be able to see it at the top over here. And you know what? We don't need all these different settings showing up in the chart. So let's remove those. The only one we really want to keep is the name. All right, now they're all gone. And we add the name. Now we can see it up over here in the indicator. And we can see it here inside. So we can name them in case we have several on our charts. Because we might want to add one for when long conditions are true and another one when short ones are. So that's how you can develop a Confluence alert system within TradingView. And in this way, you can develop more complex automated trading strategies that you can use to TradersPost. We'll go ahead and post that script to the community library as well as to our blog in case you want to use it yourself or expand it into something more amazing and wonderful than ever before. That's it for me, and we'll see you in the next video.